Not right now, it's not. I'll send you guys an email by Friday.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, we're trying to figure out. But I will. Okay. Thank you. You're welcome.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll call the December 4th Select Board meeting to order. We'll accept the agenda with one change. We are postponing the Conservation Commission appointment to allow the candidates to come and speak on December 18th, and we'll be doing that appointment in early January, at the first meeting in January, and we'll be leaving that open until that time. Otherwise, announcements, we do also have one announcement to add to the agenda, which is we are officially now the Select Board, and Jennifer Cohen and Melissa Murphy are here to present.
Thank you very much for letting us stop in. We received the signed bill, so now it's officially law. You may remember a couple of years ago, we filed a home rule petition, and it was voted overwhelmingly with support at town meeting in 2018, and it's now a law. And we'd like to present a copy of this to you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, that was really nice. This meeting is being video and audio recorded, and our only other announcement right now is that our next Solid Waste Summit, and in fact, I think the sort of finale for now is next Thursday, December 12th, from 6 to 8 here in this room, and it's meant to be a wrap-up of all the summits that we've had since summer.
Okay, this is the public comment portion of the agenda for anything that's otherwise not on our agenda for discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In light of the letter that Dave Iverson wrote to the town and the board, I don't know what's going on with this mic, and some pictures I sent to the board. I have copies of the pictures, some of the pictures if you need to see. I ask that you reconsider the license, SPPF, for the use of the public beach, and also, if not under the license, under the memorandum of understanding, the wording in there, the board can also dissolve. The letter and the pictures speak for themselves. I don't need to get into it here at the public comment part, but I just wanted to make that part of the record, and if you had any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay. I think we're waiting to hear from Jeff Carlson on this. But thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And we're in
much,
receipt of your email. Are there any other public comments? Hearing none, there's no new business that I'm aware of. We'll move on to approval of minutes from June 5th.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of payroll and treasury warrants.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of pending contracts. Are there any questions or comments?
No, I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We have a couple of gift acceptances under consent.
I would make a motion to accept with letters of thanks.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Committee appointments, where have the 3 uncontested to appoint.
I would make a motion to accept all 3.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Real estate matters. Ken Bogrand, our real estate specialist.
Sorry, there's one.
Oh, sorry.
Fireworks.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just skipped right over that contentious issue.
Good evening, Janet Schulte, Director of Culture and Tourism. I have a timeline for you to outline how we got to where we are today, but the long story short is that the contract was signed on November 14th. We had a 3-year contract with the fireworks company that ended on July 5th, the day we had the last fireworks. We immediately went out to create an IFB and have it reviewed around the town and have it posted and the like. It came back on November 14th, and I called that day the Atlas, or I emailed them that day and got the email back saying that they didn't have availability on July 4th. Because when we stepped out of the queue for July 4th, we stepped out of priority for getting that date. So I can go through the dates if you'd like to know what happened when. No, so that's,
It's okay. I think the long story short is that we'll do July 3rd and with a rain date of July 5th, and that we don't really have another option for this coming year.
that's what I've discussed with the company when I talked to them on the 15th of November.
Is there any chance to use another company?
I think the contract's been signed and awarded.
And that contract said anytime between July 1st and 6th, and they still can't honor July 4th?
That's correct. That's the way that contract had been structured prior to this one. In the event that we had problems like the beach closure. When I called them and explained that we had, the beach issue had been addressed and that we were eager to get back to the 4th, they're willing to work with us to have it on July 4th, 2021 and July 4th, 2022. But coming in November for a July 4th date, a few months out, is, I knew from following the company's Facebook post how busy they are on July 4th, and they're just completely booked. And then they need to do the logistics of finding a barge and all the other transport issues that are associated with putting on a fireworks show on July 4th.
How do we get in the queue to be on? Because they're saying now, 2021 will be okay, but how do we get back in the priority for July 4th?
They understand now when I was able to speak with them on the 15th of November that we want to go back to the 4th, that we've addressed the things that had us move it off, the fireworks display off the 4th, and they're eager to work with us to create a memorandum of understanding to address that.
Okay. I think it's not the end of the world being Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
The observed holiday is July 3rd in terms of the day people get off.
Right. Yeah, I did see that, so that helps.
People will be here for it versus it being a Wednesday or Thursday.
And we'll immediately get word out to the real estate board and lodging association, Facebook, social media, all that.
I'm okay with it. I think it seems like a sort of reasonable consequence of changing it when we did. And as long as we have it in the contract that it'll be going to the 4th, 21-22, I'd be okay to accept the recommendation of changing the date to July 3rd, 2020.
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. I'll call them
Thank you.
tomorrow.
I will just make a comment is I think we've coming off 2 or 3 years where 4th was sort of midweek. So we had a full week of very busy time. I think this is all going to be squished into a weekend now. We're going to have a weekend. Maybe the people will come on one side or the other of it, but we've been very fortunate for the last 3 years that it was a full week vacation that kicked off the summer. So
Matt, do you think the peak's gonna be higher on that weekend? So
Yeah,
the
I
stress of the
Yep,
resources.
I think you're gonna see, and I think we're gonna, my guess, is, I track it, I think we'll be it'll be through the roof. For businesses are gonna really, it's be crazy for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, is my guess, but.
Do you think that's regardless of whether it's the 3rd or the 4th, though? In terms
Yeah,
of
the
fireworks?
third, fourth, fifth, it doesn't really
Yeah.
make a difference. Fifth might spill you into, Monday, Tuesday. If it's up Sunday, it might spill the business in for a couple more days. But when, we've been fortunate. We've had a full week of 4th of July for 3 or 4 years because of the way the dates fell. So,
We may end up with some disappointed people who planned to arrive on the 4th because Saturday's a big turnover day, that there won't be fireworks.
I know we've already decided on the 3rd, but is there any benefit to the community, businesses to have it on the 5th? Public safety?
I would think the 3rd is better because it's the observed holiday.
Better for families than doing a Sunday night and having to go back to work Monday.
Okay.
And then that gives us the 5th for a rain date where.
Right.
Okay, so moving on to real estate.
Good afternoon, Ken Bogran, real estate specialist. 3 items today. The first is the release of an easement on 46 Matacasham Valley Road. When the town deeded the property as part of the yard sale program to the owner, there is a pathway and an access. So what was put in place was that the town was given an easement in order to be able to have that access until the owner could move the fence and provide the appropriate easement in the place where it's supposed to be. That has been achieved now, and Jeff Carlson has examined it, and everything is in compliant with the way it should be. So it's my recommendation that we agree to release the easement that is in place relative to having protected that access.
Questions?
I just, again, this is the final step in this.
With this particular, there are 4 or 5 parcels in this thing, and this is the final step with respect to this one.
Okay.
The one with 48, that still has to come, there's still more steps with respect to that. But I have one comment with respect to that. Matt, what we've been able to do is with the DPW, they have agreed to create the parking area on the town-owned land closest to the bank, and that will be in place for this summer. So it'll be a 20 by 60 parking space. Will be almost double the amount of parking that's currently available there. So that will really help with the access issues that we've had in the past. The other things that we had talked about, 3 other areas, they are on airport land, and so Jeff is having discussions with NOAA as to getting permission from the airport to be able to put those in as parking areas. But that's not something we can do at this point in time.
Move approval?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
The second matter is,
I'm going to recuse from this one.
yeah. The second matter relates to property at 106 and 106A Surfside Road. You may recall that this property was acquired for the purpose of creating a 40B. The person who then stepped in acquired the property after discussions and negotiations with the town, indicating that if the zoning would be able to be changed from 2-acre zoning to 1-acre zoning, that they would then be able to create 2 plots for single-family homes, and with the yard sale properties, they would then have 2 legal-sized lots that they would then be able to develop and avoid the 40B. At the time, this was all agreed to, passed at town meeting, and when the A&R was filed, one step was failed to be done at that point in time, and that was to release the restriction relative to no subdivision. It still applies that you can't subdivide the lots, but the fact of the matter is that that release is necessary because one of the parcels is for sale right now and can't close from a legal point of view without the release of that restriction. That restriction has no impact with respect to effectively what was achieved by the creation of subdivision of the properties to avoid the 40B at that point in time. So it's my recommendation that we do what should have been done back then, release the subdivision restriction so that the transaction can go forward with respect to the sale of the property.
Move approval?
Second. Oh, sorry. All those in favor?
You're the boss now.
I'm the boss. Not in the right chair.
Come on.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye, that was unanimous.
The last item on the agenda for real estate is the Surfside Road property exchange. We've been in negotiations with the Kaiser family for more than 6 months with respect to the swap of their property, which has a main house and a garage and a shed on it, and is subdividable into 3 parcels for 2 lots in Surfside that were approved for disposal at town meeting in 2009. The select board, you as a select board, have agreed to enter into a memorandum of agreement relative to the acquisition, to that swap, with the swap or the 2 parcels plus the payment of $370,000 at closing. The agreement also provides a rental arrangement with respect to the family that they can stay in the house for leases for 2 years or until the property that they're acquiring in Surfside, their houses are built there, but it can't be any longer than 3 years. And there is a market rental rate with respect to the property that goes up from the rate in year 1 to the rate in year 2 and the rate in year 3. So it is my recommendation after discussions with the school that this is a very important piece in terms of the creation of the campus for the school. It's also a very important piece in terms of being able to eventually close the gap of the roadway down there when we finally, as a town, be able to put together the entire campus for the school. So again, it's my recommendation that we move forward with this.
Comments?
Motion to approve?
I would second, and just to clarify that, this was based on a review of the appraised values as well as the additional value to the town and school of the location of the properties. So I would second.
And the appraised value was based on this being a 3-lot parcel.
Yeah, I've had some, well, let's vote it and then.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Yeah, I've had some people who had concerns along the same lines, and I explained what you guys just did. The school is looking ahead, and I give them credit for looking ahead and realizing what their needs are going to be 10, 15, 20 years from now. This was a good chance to help them acquire that and do this.
Well, the thing too, Matt, is that the arrangement that I have with the school at this point in time is they don't get this property unless we get something back from them. And particularly, I'm focused on the property at Four Corners, the parcel that's there in the area by the parking lot, to be able to have that available so that if the town wants to move forward with respect to building a rotary at that juncture of those roads, that property, that land would be available for town use.
Right, but you're also, and that's, the rotaries are kind of contentious, and those are only going to happen if they go through the process.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
But the one idea that you have discussed down at Four Corners is a really good one, is stop having the pool come out onto the main road and come out back behind. If you describe that.
Yeah, well, what I've worked on with them is that to get rid of the access off of Vestal into the parking lot, close that off, and then when you're on Sparks Avenue, down closer beyond, closer to where you come out from behind the school, have an access in to the parking area. And that's the access in and egress as well. That the parking lot would then not be a pass-through in front of the pool. So it would provide additional parking for use by the school, excuse me, but it will be safer in terms of the traffic, in terms of getting people in and out, and not having that cross on that really very heavy, busy road. Any other question? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, under committee reports, we have a update from the Cannabis Advisory Committee. The Chair, Barry Rector, is here.
So, good evening, everyone, and thanks for inviting me tonight and members of the Cannabis Control Committee. Unfortunately, they're not here at the moment. So I just want to briefly introduce you to the members of the board, just so you know who they are, and then kind of run you through the process. So I'm anticipating getting through this packet probably in about 10, 15 minutes at best. We'll get back to that because that's kind of an important point that I'm just going to want to bring up to you. So the committee itself consists of 7 people. Myself as the chair, Malcolm McNabb is the vice chair, David Martin, who's the secretary, Jason Bridges, Dorothy Hertz, David Iverson, and Jack Sinicki. Just to let you know, we've had 4 meetings so far. Our first meeting, which was held in August, was an organizational meeting, so I'd probably say it's fair game to say we've been into 3 meetings at this moment in time. A lot of what we do is going to center around what comes from guidance and thought with the Cannabis Control Committee, that is the statewide committee that deals with this. I think what you have to realize, this is a brand new industry that's out there at this point. Right now, what we find is that industry is constantly changing. Everyone's learning a lot from the growth in the process as well too. Uses are starting to expand at this point as people are getting their footing underneath them with what's going to happen. We find that there are new rules being put in place, and there's a lot of refinements that are happening as well too. So there's a lot to keep on track here. And just when we think we know everything, we really don't, and there's new changes that are taking place. So just like with what's going on with the rest of the state, here on Nantucket, we need to be sensitive to that as well too and respond back in kind. During the course of those 3 meetings we've found that we really have to kind of define ourselves in the process as well too. As I said, the industry is large. There's a lot of moving components to it at this point. There's a lot of areas of consideration we can be looking at, but again, we just have to kind of chew off a piece at a time and then just start focusing on certain issues which are relevant and timely at the moment. Some of the things we've done so far is we formalized our relationship with the 2 cannabis partners on the island, Green Lady. I know both Jason and myself had an opportunity to tour the facility as well too, and I made it mandatory for the rest of the people on our board to do that so they have a feel for what's going on. And as Act Natural comes online, we'll be working with them as well too. Let me see here. So we've been meeting for roughly about an hour at every meeting, and we realize the workload's been pretty serious about what we have to do. So in December, we've come to a decision that we'll start meeting for 2.5 hours. There's a large workload that's ahead of us. One of the things that came up during the process is we were asked to sponsor for Annual Town Meeting 20 a new change to the industry, which was anticipated, which was to get into cultivation, micro businesses, and craft cooperative. All 3 fall under cultivation, essentially. So one thing I'd probably like to say to you is that in order to get there, what we're going to need to do is look at our own bylaws here, specifically Chapter 95, which is going to deal with marijuana, and then Chapter 139, which is definitions and zoning. So just to make you aware that those things are going to be coming up. So one thing I'm going to ask this board, if you'd be so kind, is in order to get this accomplished, is I'm going to ask you to start thinking about putting at least anywhere between 2 to 4 placeholder articles under which we can do that for both Chapter 95 and under Chapter 139 as well too. like I said, there's going to be a lot of work ahead of us. And right now, I wish I could give you something a little more definitive than that. But again, we're just slowly putting this thing together. And what we want to bring forward before the town is something that's going to pass through town meeting. We don't want to rush it. We don't want to try to just put bad information in place or information that we're going to wind up changing. So we do need a little bit of latitude at the moment under which to accomplish that task. I don't know if you want to discuss that issue for a moment or just give it some thought. I don't know how you want to proceed with that thought I've just thrown out to you. But the other thing we're going to look at too is trying to update Chapter 95, which is marijuana, because that deals also with the retail and medical. And we found that since April, there's been a lot of changes that have taken place to that as well too. And to be able to respond to that in kind, we're going to have to update some of our bylaws to have that take place as well too. So that in essence is where we're at. I want to keep it short and sweet because I know you have a lot of business before you. But certainly you're welcome to show up. We meet the third Thursday of every month. Right now between 1 and 3:30 over at the Water Company. You know where to find me. So if you have any questions or anything, feel free to approach us. We're there. We want to work with you. And thanks for having faith and confidence in us as we begin to work together. Questions?
I have one comment.
Yeah.
I think we've got a lot of articles this year, and the sooner we can get the information, the better. If we end up getting a bunch of things at the last minute, that makes it very difficult for us to process, for the administration to process. And if it needs explanation to the public, we can't be doing it last minute. I think we do the voters a disservice if we don't have at least 3 or 4 weeks prior. I think it makes it very hard at town meeting, and we've been saying that to everybody. So the sooner we can get it, the better.
And I agree with that.
Yeah.
Definitely the sooner we can get it to you, the better as well too. But realize that we're running under a very compressed time frame as well. Anything that we're going to wind up doing is going to be through the 7 members of that board pulling that together as well too. And they all have lives beyond this committee. So that's what I'm saying is that to go in and craft this document from ground back up again is going to take some time. Believe me, we're sensitive to the time frames, and I've met with Libby today to understand exactly what those time frames are. But I'm respectfully requesting as well too that we have that latitude to produce documents for you that will actually make some good, solid sense. And I don't know if Jason wants to chime in as well too a little bit. Not to put you on the spot.
No, I was going to ask Libby, because you guys met today, did the time frames work out? Can we get the placeholders in? Because we got is it a zoning board meeting or a planning board meeting that's going to review this?
So planning is going to have to look at this as well too, and I'm just starting to talk to the process with that as well too. I'm hoping, and I can't answer for them directly, but I am putting out a notice to the chair at this point that would respectfully like to get in on their December 5th meeting to begin to discuss some of this stuff. But I'm set to work with Andrew to make sure that he's got all the appropriate information in place to try to again put something in place that'll make some sense.
So I think we could have something in January, which gives us a good 3 months to look at it. That would be the goal. Sorry, Libby, you probably.
Barry and I, as we mentioned, we did meet this morning to go over the timing and exactly what sorts of articles we are talking about. And I certainly have town council available to draft anything in particular. And I agree with Matt. It's important for us to understand what exactly it is that we're going to be asking for. So I think the general idea is to have placeholders so that it gives us the flexibility to perhaps refine what we're really seeking, it maybe in the FinCom motion or the planning board motion. But we definitely don't want to wait till the last minute on that. And it may be that some aspect of this does not happen at the 2020 annual town meeting. It happens at a subsequent town meeting, and we just focus on the easy to accomplish for now, something like that.
And I agree with that. And like I said, one of the driving fundamental principles is we just don't want to turn out anything. We want to really turn out something that has some good, solid quality behind it as well, too. That'll pass muster both legally and at town meeting.
I would just add, and Barry and I talked about this morning, too, that as I think we know, and as he mentioned, this is very new industry, and then regulations are new. And as he said, and we found this in our office as well, as soon as we think we've got a handle on the regulations, we find out that they were just amended, or there's going to be a change, or something like that. So we don't want to be too premature either, and then find out we did all this work and now that's not the way it is anymore. It has to be changed. So that's just something to think about.
Great. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barry.
No, thanks. And thanks for having us here tonight. And we look forward to working with you in the future. And thanks for placing the confidence in us to make this happen. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a good night.
Okay, up next, we have a public hearing to consider increases in the sewer user fees and modification of the rate structure. I will open the public hearing.
While we're waiting for our people to come down, as the board knows, back in October, we presented the board with a sewer rate study, and we let you know at that time that we were going to be needing to schedule a public hearing to increase, unfortunately, sewer rates to cover all of the projects that are going to be coming online over the next few years. And that's an increase that does need to be in place for fiscal 20, the current fiscal year. So I think what we're going to hear is about what the upcoming rate increase would be and what we're working on to sort of try to flatten out the impact of the increase into a kind of a tiered structure. And that work is not complete yet, but we would hope that it would be in place by the end of this fiscal year.
Thank you very much for having me. Yes, so I'm going to go over what some of the bills will look like for different types of usage from January through June of 2020. And so, as we talked about at the last meeting, we are recommending a 10% rate increase on the current rate structure that stands. And that is just for January through June. And as she alluded to, we are working on looking at other options for the future. So things will definitely change after this point. To show a revenue generation comparison first, it's not significant with the rate increase that we're proposing, even though it is 10% across the board. And part of that's primarily because a lot of it's on the winter side. But we show here what we estimated using our model to be the difference in revenue generated for the entire fiscal 20 with your current rates and with the 10% rate increase on both the minimum or base charge and your usage charge for summer and winter. And we also show, to be conservative, that in January, when rates increase, folks may use less water. And so we've shown a 2% decrease in usage during that period of time as well. And so as you can see here on the metered side, so again, that base and that 8 and 9 per 100 cubic feet, we're showing an increase in revenue of about $240,000. And for the non-metered users, a revenue increase of $20,000. And now I'm going to go through several different types of bills for different types of usage. And so the first bill here, this is for looking at fiscal 19 usage data, which is the usage data that we use to create the model and move forward from. The average winter usage is what we had was 2.89 cubic feet. And so the difference here, you can see the difference between your current bill with the $8 per CCF to $8.80 per CCF. And from January through June in the winter rate. On the other side, the average summer usage is slightly higher at 7.3 cubic feet. And so we're showing that what a summer rate bill would look like at that average summer usage. So just for the last couple months of that fiscal 20 period, going from 95.69 up to 105.26. Then we looked at different percentiles and the median of, again, that fiscal 19 user data to calculate different statistics. And so on the left side here, again, without an increase, looking at the 10th percentile of usage, so pretty much your lowest almost, without an increase and with an increase. So in the winter, that's actually 0 CCF falls under the 10th percentile, so they're only paying the minimum. And then in the summer, the 10th percentile is 1 CCF. So your bill is not increasing significantly in this case. For the 20th percentile of usage, which is 4 CCF in summer and again still 0 CCF in winter, the bill's increasing from 66 to 72.60 for summer, and again just the minimum is increasing from 30 to 33 for the winter. For the median usage, which we calculated to be about 800 cubic feet in the summer and 100 cubic feet in the winter, your bill is going from 102 to 112.20 cents in summer and 38 to 41.80 in with the winter rate. So again, all these examples are to try to help illustrate what that might look for you and where you fall in that spectrum. The 75th percentile of usage, now we're up to 1,600 cubic feet in summer and 400 cubic feet in winter. So in the summer, that bill would go from 174 to 191, and with the winter rate, it would go from 62 to 68.20. And finally, the 99th percentile of usage, which for summer is 1,400 cubic feet, and for winter is 3,000 cubic feet. In the summer, the bill would increase from 1,055 up to 1,161. And with the winter rate at 3,000 cubic feet, it would increase from $270 to $297. And again, this is for January through June, along your current schedule of when winter and summer rates apply. And after that point, we will be talking about a tiered rate.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Can you give me just a visual on, like, what's an example of a 10th percentile versus 99? Is 99 a commercial building, or is it a building with 10 bedrooms? I'm just trying to think what's the difference. Like, who's it? Because the 10th percentile is $3 a month. This is 150.
Yes.
How do I visualize this? Who's in the 99th percentile?
That's definitely not residential.
Right.
So do you want to talk about the 110 gallons per day?
Yeah, I mean, the way this, I mean, under Title V, they calculate it basically as 110 per gallons per bedroom per day. So a 3-bedroom house, excuse me, is approximately 330 gallons per day of sewer usage.
And I think that's about 13 CCF.
Okay. 13. Okay.
So that's higher than what we're calculating as the average.
Okay. All right. That just helps me frame it a little bit.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that we're doing is, I know when we talked to you about this, we said we had been looking at other options. We need to increase it for this 6-month period as we get ready to set the tax rate, because there was an increase in expenses, and while we can cover them with some of the additional revenue that's coming in with the new connections, there is some need to increase the rate. And I think the last time we actually increased it was, I think, back in 2014 or 15. So it has been a few fiscal years since we've done this. What we've been working with, excuse me, with Hazen and Sawyer is looking at a tiered model, which would actually expand the range of affordability, and people on the lower end would be paying less for those blocks of usage. We're working with the water company to see how many tiers their software can handle and accept in the billing process. But we're looking at it in a way to really smooth it out for the people that are using it on a consistent basis, and then the really heavy users, or the real, in the peak summer months where there's a lot of turnover in houses and there's a lot of demand on the system, that increased demand is being paid for by the people, the individuals or the entities that are actually using and creating that additional demand on the system. So we're looking at doing that to talk to probably to town council as well, because we're looking at, is there an opportunity to do any type of affordability for breaks for senior citizens or anything like that, to try to make it as affordable as possible, because we certainly recognize as we move forward there's a lot of capital projects related to sewer that are there related to upgrades to the plant and pump stations and things that are all typically funded by the user. So we're trying to look at this in a much more global way than just worrying about in a smaller myopic view. So we're trying to encompass all of this to make it more affordable as we go down the road of these other needed upgrades and the normal increases in operating a sewer plant of this size.
Just a question, how many non-metered accounts do we have? Do you know approximately?
Do you know off the top of your head?
I think it's in the range of 300.
Okay. All right.
And do we know when there might be another sewer rate increase? Is it something that happens every 5 years, or is it project related?
I think that it'll be more regular than every 5 years, but I think the next step would be, as we work through the tiering model, to obviously present it to the town manager and come up with a plan. Changing that rate structure would need to come before you as the Board of Sewer Commissioners to approve. The goal is to have it in place for July 1st, so we've been working with Hazen. The expectation is that, depending on all of the timing, that we'd probably come in late April or early May to be able to, and because we're going to also need some public outreach to explain how this is going to work and do things of this nature to explain how people's bills would be impacted. And I'm sure that there'll be a lot of questions about what will this do to my bill, or how does this. So we certainly want to make sure that we put our best foot forward, and if and when we do move to this different rate structure and rate model.
And do you think anyone's bill, or do we know yet if anyone's bill is going to go down once we put in the tiered phase? Will it be some up, some down?
I think that there will be, correct me if I'm wrong, there'll be a percentage of the entire billing population that their bills will decrease based on the tiering. Mm-hmm. How many that will be, I wouldn't want to venture a guess right now because we're still going through the models, but I do think that there's an opportunity on the lower end to potentially decrease some of the impacts of the bills to people.
Yeah, I think it'll depend partially on the number of tiers we can use, and again, considering the CIP, but it's looking very favorable, and that's the driver, is especially to increase the improve the affordability, especially for that 20th quintile of income. Mm-hmm. And so it's suggesting that so far.
Do we have any plans to include any sort of water saving tips for people to help manage their bill?
It probably would be handled through the outreach that we would do. Mm-hmm. But it's something that we can talk about what we could do, or how we could best accomplish that.
Yeah, maybe a page, or maybe Florencia could help with something like that.
I want to comment, put stuff in the bills as it is now.
Yeah,
they do a lot of that.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry.
Good.
From a, we should do small increases every year on a lot of these things, because when you don't, it does get away from you, and then it looks like 10%. Oh my God, that's a lot. If we had been doing this for the last 5 or 6 years, 1% a year, 1.5% a year, 2% a year, we'd be we wouldn't even be talking about it. Right. So that's one of the things. Back when we were doing the septic, we went 25 years or something without changing it, and people were complaining when we started charging. If it had just gone up cost of living, that $100 connection would have been $2,000. So we have to stay on top of it, which we're doing a better job of doing. And I think the idea of tiering it is to charge more to the heavy users at the heavy point of the year. We're building an incredibly large infrastructure for the peak, whether it be water or sewer. No matter how you look at it, we're building this island up for 6 weeks, 8 weeks. We should be trying to capture as much as we can from what is causing it. And it shouldn't be on the back, it shouldn't be always on the backs of the year-round residents who are, struggling to stay here year-round. I think so. That's part of the idea of this, is to find a system that's more fair for everybody. So I look forward to seeing what those numbers are and how we can do that.
Yeah. I think the tiered model is great. We could find a solution for senior citizens if they're on a lower usage. That could be like what Rita was saying, someone's bill could go down. That could be the break right there, if that works out. I had a question on, we're increasing the rate just because in general everything goes up. Like bread goes up every year, flour goes up, but we have a lot more projects coming in. And I talked to Brian about this, but I didn't have enough time before we started this meeting. How do we decide that all these projects that are happening to our wastewater treatment facility and these pump stations go to the users versus the tax base? How have we decided that in the past? I understand like really big projects like Shimo, that goes to the whole tax base. But I'm just curious how we decide that.
I mean, part of it, I think, is basically is a policy decision that you as either the select board or the board of sewer commissioners would recommend to yourselves how to do it. I think what we had talked about was, I mean, obviously something such as Nantucket Harbor, Shimo, and Plus does create a benefit to the entire island, not just to the users of the system themselves. You know, when we look at pump stations, they're really, the need to increase or change out a pump station is really derived by the users of the system, not all of the residents of the island necessarily. So, I mean, I think it really, the way that I would look at it when we went through the Nantucket Harbor Shimo really was, one of the driving factors is that the benefit to the entire island in terms of the water quality and the potentials for that. So I think that's part of it. But again, it really comes down to the board and how you see the best way to fund the project.
So far, you've done it a couple of ways. The all taxpayer-funded project was Nantucket Harbor Shimo Plus. That was entirely by the general fund, and that was, obviously, we had a debt exclusion for that. The other was an upgrade, an earlier upgrade to the Surfside Treatment Facility, which was around $40 million, and that was the so-called one-third, one-third, one-third method, which was intended to be one-third taxpayers, one-third new users, one-third existing users. It turned out that the new users didn't come on as quickly as had possibly been anticipated, so all of the users and the new as they came on are continuing to share that cost. But the Sconset treatment plant, for example, has been entirely paid for by all the users. That wasn't paid for by the general fund, I don't believe. And we just haven't really had that big of projects. The most recent Surfside upgrades have been paid for by the sewer users.
That's correct. And the same with the rehabilitation of the C Street, rehabilitation, and renovation of C Street pump station was funded within the sewer enterprise fund itself.
Yeah, statutorily, some things you can charge, onto new growth, and some you can't. You can't, if you're replacing a pipe, you can't really charge them. If the pipe has to be bigger, you can. So there's different things that you have to work around. I think the idea is it should be shared. It shouldn't be that everybody pays and then the septic people don't have any, don't get any break. They use the plant, but not nearly at the same level, at the same cost as people who are on septic, on sewer. So there's, so that it's really, it's as much a political football as it is a, political decision as it is a policy or a, you've got to get the vote at town meeting. I mean, so it's very difficult. I think, my sense of it should be shared, and it shouldn't all just go on the taxpayers, because the taxpayers are going to be facing a huge burden. And so I think as much as possible, it should go to the new growth that's causing it, to the new properties that are forcing us to build at this level. And so that, but how do you do that in a way that's acceptable is the tricky part, and that's fair. So.
Okay, thank you. Quick question. I know Nantucket sewers didn't pass, but what did we end up doing? Was that 80-20? How do we end up structuring that? Yeah, the Nantucket sewer.
Nantucket hasn't gone forward yet.
I know.
So we haven't really structured anything.
I thought we took it to town meeting. We had an idea.
It would have been all on the tax base if it had passed at town meeting.
Right. Okay. That's what I was wondering, because I remember sitting out here and it was like 80-20 and it switched a couple times.
In fact, it passed at town meeting and did not pass at the
ballot.
subsequent election.
Right.
And it was one of the highest unit costs that anyone had ever seen, per unit cost in Nantucket to do it. And not a lot of the Nantucket, not all, but some of the Nantucket people were scared of it passing. They were worried that once it happened, that Nantucket would become Brant Point. And so, so there's some real, there's, even though you don't use sewer, to limit growth, that in fact, that is what happens. And so, people out there are very concerned that if it went out at that time, at that amount, and they were also scared of how much they were going to pay. I look at it and think that a fair amount is what someone would pay over the life of their house for if septic. You know, I think people should be pitching in as much as it costs someone for their septic. And then the rest of that we could pick up in other ways. But that isn't always how the vote goes. You know, sometimes the vote, if it's a lot of people who are voting, they'll vote their pocketbook, and, you know, the plus parcels, perfect example. There was no way that was gonna go through any way but, you know, so.
I was asking this because in sitting in capital program committee, there's a lot of sewer projects, which stays within the enterprise funds. That's done on the report for tonight. But I was just curious how we thought through that on who pays it. Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak?
Well, this got more interesting than I thought it was going to be, but I just had a question about the sewer hookups because, oh, sorry, Jill Veith. I live in Surfside. I was just curious about the sewer hookup fees because I know so many people complain about that, and I imagine one day I'm going to have to get on sewer myself and pay it, and I didn't know, does that just pay for does any of that money go to the capital campaigns?
Well, there's a couple things you might be talking to. There's the sewer connection fee, which is $2,000. That is simply the fee to allow you to connect physically to the sewer. And then there is what we're calling what are we calling it again?
Privilege fee.
Well, but we're going to change the name of it. So it's been called the privilege fee, which is around a $6,200-ish fee for properties that hooked into the sewer after 2004. And that is meant to offset some of the cost of that initial Surfside sewer treatment plant upgrade that I mentioned earlier. There's also, although we're in the process of modifying this in the regulations, what's called a capacity utilization fee, which is meant to be for people who are outside of a needs area, which is an area that we want to have sewered. But if they're outside of it and they were to come in and be sewered, the sewer system is not designed for them, so they would pay an extra fee that would ultimately, theoretically, go into a fund that would offset future costs to expand or upgrade the sewer system because of them coming in.
Okay. But so some of the privilege fee you're saying does go to some capital cost. It was just when Matt was talking about everybody sharing, I was thinking about that particular fee because that is a stiff one for people.
Yeah, it pays off the debt service, basically.
The privilege fee pays off the 1/3 of the portion of the debt service for the upgrade to the treatment facility.
Thanks.
And when you look at that, the cost of people are complaining that it's so high, but the cost is 10-20% of what the actual cost would be if you charged everyone everything. You know, so that's the part that people have to remember when they complain about $16,000, and I agree that's a lot of money, but if they would have to pay 4 or 5 times that. It was about $80,000 per hookup or something when you divided the 40 million by the amount of houses we were going to be able to add on to that. So people are being subsidized fairly substantially. Right. So, and that number, the other point about that number is that's a pretty good number when you compare it to how much it costs now to do a septic out here. You know, so it really isn't. It seems like a lot when you have to pay it at once, but if you have to put in a septic or build a septic, it's very expensive now too. So.
Are there any other public comments? If not, I'll close the public hearing.
I'd make a motion to accept the proposed sewer rate fee changes.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Madam Chair, I have a question. So this is just for January to June, right?
That's correct.
And then we're coming back with
We will-
a tiered system in March, April, or May, or whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
That will come back to, so that we can implement that with the start of the new fiscal year.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Just to close that out, so next step is we need to advertise this increase in the newspaper, and we'll need to work with Comet on the billing and getting it set and get users who are going to be impacted notified.
Next up is town manager's report.
Okay, so first off, we've got our Chief Technology Officer, Karen McGonigal, who's going to take us through a governance steering committee update. This is a group that was recommended in IT, a townwide IT assessment a couple of years ago. And when Karen was hired, one of her first tasks was to get this group put together. And she's going to give us a little bit of an update and maybe talk about some future IT improvements overall.
Good evening. As Libby said, I am here to provide an update on the IT Governance Committee. In 2016, the town contracted Plant Moran to perform an assessment on IT services and produce a report with recommendations. Of the key recommendations that came out of the report, there are 3 that are being addressed in tonight's update, and that is the IT governance process, project management and project portfolio management, the project request process. We're going to focus primarily on the IT governance process, but it is dependent on adequate portfolio management and efficient request process. The Gartner Group defines IT governance as a set of processes that ensure the use of IT services to enable an organization to achieve its strategic goals. IT governance is a strategic role. It's run by senior management. It is not day-to-day IT services management. It's an overall strategic role. If you look at the diagram on the slide, the IT governance framework consists of 5 areas. Meeting stakeholder needs, covering the enterprise end-to-end. It's an enterprise-wide initiative. It doesn't focus on a specific department or a specific type of technology. Utilizes a single integrated framework that's consistent across the organization and utilizes a holistic approach. It looks at the whole organization, not just a single area. And again, it separates governance from management. And this is really important, that IT governance is an overall strategic initiative, and the day-to-day management of the IT department is something a little bit different. So out of all of this, I was tasked with forming the IT Governance Committee. We started this last winter, and the committee consists of myself, Chief Technology Officer, the Assistant Town Manager, Greg Tivnan, and directors and deputy directors from a variety of departments, including police, fire, DPW, sewer, and plus departments. We're currently being guided by a professional facilitator from Plant Moran who has been with us from the beginning to get us started on developing our vision and mission statement, all the way up to how we should be running our meetings as we move forward. The committee role, as shown on the screen, is to evaluate, prioritize, and approve IT and IT-related projects. This could include a department project, such as a building renovation or implementation of a new application that requires IT services and resources. It could require personnel resources. It could require networking, space in our data center, that type of thing. So anything that utilizes IT department resources is part of the IT governance process. Another role of ours is to align and allocate IT resources based on prioritization of projects, and to develop and implement a review framework and develop and implement the review and approval processes for all projects. We started meeting last February. There's one meeting missing on this slide. I didn't notice it until today. We did meet in June as well in between. So there was a meeting between April and September. We met every month in the beginning and then started every couple of months. And beginning on December 12th, we're going to go to a quarterly meeting format. I'm serving as the chairperson, and the Plant Moran facilitator has been guiding the process and will be in attendance with the December 12th meeting. I believe that's the last meeting that they're contracted to
to participate in. The Team Dynamics project portfolio management software that we have been implementing is going to be used to manage the portfolio. And it will be utilized as the system of record moving forward. Keep in mind that it's not illustrated on the slide, but all projects that are added to the project portfolio first go through all standard budget and operating budget and capital budget review process. So we're not just putting projects in here. These are previously approved, funded projects that go into the system. Progress that we have made. We have developed our vision and mission statement and developed and completed our committee charter. We reviewed and prioritized the initial project portfolio that was provided from the NIT assessment in 2016 and have continued on from there. So this is an ongoing process. We will continually review and prioritize the IT project portfolio based on how it aligns with the organization's needs and the town strategic plan. The IT project and request and review process is currently in process, and like I said, we're using Team Dynamics for this. We are building that portfolio within Team Dynamics right now, and it's going to be introduced to the governance team at the December 12th meeting, and that will be utilized as a system of record moving forward. All requests will eventually go into Team Dynamics in a workflow. Requests can potentially consist of projects that have not been approved, but they will not ever be converted to a project until they go through the regular budgeting process. And then development of an IT request policy, which we haven't started, but we do have the foundation in place, and that will be an agenda item for the December 12th meeting. So hopefully we will be able to begin working on that shortly. This is just a quick status taken from Team Dynamics. We currently have 6 active projects, including virtualization, internet bandwidth upgrade, cybersecurity awareness training program, Munis employee self-services, Windows 7 to Windows 10 upgrade, which is being driven by Microsoft no longer supporting Windows 7, and that's a high priority project for us right now. And then in the EnerGov e-permitting phase 1, which is essentially completed, but at the time that I did this presentation, it was not. In the planning phase is EnerGov e-permitting phase 2, which is the citizen portal, and that will soon be moving to an active project. Not started are the DPW fiber part of the infrastructure improvements, and that is going to be worked on after the holidays. Of the 5 requested projects, one is the IT resource requirements for a traffic counter project that DPW is working on. EnerGov Phase 3, which would be the last piece of that, tying everything together and adding licensing. Collaboration tools utilizing Office 365. Upgrading our Adobe Acrobat to enterprise subscription service, and the Munis cashiering point of sale system for departments that take in payments. Those charts and reports you see up on the screen are examples of what the Team Dynamics reports will look like once we get this up and running. I didn't give you actual reports because there was still some test data in the system right now, so the results aren't completely accurate. But it gives you an idea of what it will look like as we when we launch it.
Does it merge with Munis? Are you able to, do they talk to each other?
Not at this time. We will be working on building a bridge between Munis and Team Dynamics so that we can pass financial data back and forth, yes. And that'll be important for both budgeting and capital planning.
All right, that makes sense.
Yep. That is, it's down the road, but it is in the plan. Yep. And then in conclusion, again, the definition of IT governance from the Gartner Group, and just a quick blurb on what the team does. I do have one more thing if anybody has any questions on this. No?
I just have a comment. I think it's great that we're doing this. It's hard to get all these departments in a room and figure out what everybody needs and how do we decide on the same programs. And it's not easy because everybody has different needs, every department. So I think it's great that we're doing it. Have you found it really helpful or really complicated getting going?
I think everybody's been very positive about participating in the group. It's a new concept for the town. We have very distributed departments, and we're feeling our way to how best to do this. And it is improving communication and collaborative efforts, though. And hopefully, the goal is really to prevent redundancy and the silo effect. The goal is not to consolidate and centralize projects and initiatives. That's not the goal. The goal is to make sure we know what's coming down the road so that I can appropriately allocate IT resources to the projects that need to get done and make sure that those resources are available when the various departments need them for their projects. It's not to take over their projects or run their projects, but to provide the resources that they need to be successful.
One more question is the Intergov, that's been taking a long, that was like 5-6 years ago, maybe even longer. We just kind of started this. The public facing, will that maybe come to fruition in 2020 or is that maybe 2021?
We will be starting the project in 2020. We have essentially completed phase 1, which is the back end. We do have a few outstanding issues that we need to work with Tyler Technologies on resolving, some of which may impact moving on to phase 2, some of which may not. I have a conference call with the department manager at Tyler for Energov on Friday, and we're going to be talking about some of the issues and hopefully get a timeline in place of when we can launch the project. I am hoping that we can start in February or March. It may be April when we start, but we will be starting it this fiscal year.
That's great. I think it's going to be a great addition, value add to the public once this gets going and we all kind of figure it out, especially for smaller things.
Exactly. It'll allow businesses and contractors to the vision is to allow the businesses and contractors to go through this process from start to finish, from initial permitting to business licensing all the way to their certificate of occupancy, right into in a single system. So it's a big vision.
Yeah, it is.
But,
Thank you.
We'll get there. Also, this morning I was asked to put together a brief statement on what the IT department might look like in a perfect world. And given that I didn't have a lot of time to do this, I just threw together a few bullet points that I will read off of this document and take from it what you will. First of all, to complete a high-speed fiber loop to all town departments, which is in process, but that is one of my visions. Provide Wi-Fi in downtown and at the beaches, including all necessary fiber or microwave installations to support wireless antennas. Use of cloud-based collaborative tools by all employees for communication, real-time file sharing, remote meetings, etc. A comprehensive disaster recovery system that will enable the town to operate if cut off from outside communications. This includes IT, public safety, school, enterprise funds, and all town departments, so an overall enterprise initiative to make sure we're protected. Fully implemented project portfolio management that everyone uses, and that would be Team Dynamics. Cloud-based Munis financial system with a real-time on-site backup to accommodate the loss of internet access during natural disasters. If we put Munis in the cloud, we have to be able to access it if we don't have the cloud available. A fully integrated point-of-sale system for all departments that take payments. Fully implemented e-permitting system that allows businesses and contractors to complete all functions online, from initial permits to licensing to final CO. Centralized wireless system to improve Wi-Fi at town buildings and provide central maintenance and management. That's a biggie for me. increase wireless coverage in town buildings, which would be a part of that. Secure mobile computing for town administrators and department heads for anywhere, anytime access and collaboration, so that no matter where we are, we can meet with each other or talk to each other or collaborate or communicate. Office, and then this gets down to a few more administrivia type things. On office administrative IT staff to support help desk, office and purchasing functions. Shift and or flex schedules to provide off hours and weekend support. Wish list. Remote work opportunities that might help to attract off-island talent. Space for equipment storage. Workspace to stage our equipment, which we don't have right now. High quality educational opportunities for the IT staff. Sufficient funding for IT staff or contracted resources to complete these initiatives. And sufficient and affordable housing to lure off-island technicians who might not qualify for subsidies. That's my wish list.
Thank you for doing that, Karen. I was driven by me. I asked Libby, because you're the expert. I want to know what's your wish list? Like, don't think about money.
Oh, I could have gone on and on.
I wrote a lot of those down. They're really, really good. And I hope in capital program committee next year, there's some in there. Because when I look at, I've said this to Libby before, when I see the IT ask for capital, it's very little and everybody else is huge. And some of these things are really, really important. I'd love to see your wish list come true.
Great.
It's interesting, and I've sent some articles to you guys, and things are changing, like out in the world on some of this, and it seems to me, sort of like in the San Juan Islands, they were having trouble with coverage and having trouble. It's similar to us. They 17,000 people, trouble with coverage. The for-profit companies were charging them a lot of money and not giving them the service. They did it as a cooperative, did it themselves, and have saved everybody, hundreds of dollars a year, millions of dollars, and it's much better. And they're able to cover more of their citizens. So I think it's at the point where we have to start thinking of this as a, sort of like electricity. Everybody needs it. So what's the most efficient way and the best way to provide it? The other issue, when I think about it, big picture, is how the fiber optic, the cable itself isn't the expense. It's burying it or hanging it and all the other things. But anytime that we do it, we should be thinking, I think, about putting that in and putting in a substantial amount in the street and bury it and own it. I think, and if we end up having to do another cable, we should be putting be putting that on the cable if we don't have access to it already, because then you could have a nonprofit or a cooperative or somebody run it, and it's sort of like we've done with like we've done with electricity, the electricity rates. We've done a really good thing for the community. I think the same thing could happen in this realm if we sort of think a little bigger about it. This is, having the connections downtown and stuff is great, but is there a way, after we get that stuff, get half your wish list done, is there a way to look at this and make it more of a utility and make it more of something that, and that we benefit as a community from? Either in a lot cheaper internet for everybody because we all need it, or or is there money flowing back to the town if we expend it on the front end? And I don't know, I've always wondered, where do I go? What is it, this committee? Is it your office? Where do these ideas go? But I'm just sort of trying to plant the seed. So.
Does the fiber optic have any benefit with some of those disaster wish list items? Like, is it any more resilient?
If it's buried, probably. I mean, fiber can break, it's glass. Mm-hmm. So it can be just as much subject to disaster as almost anything else. But if you have a self-contained physical network on your island and we lose connectivity to the rest of the world, at least we can communicate with each other. We do, the public safety department has microwave in place that works in certain areas. That's not subject to the same kind of breakage. Mm-hmm. But nothing's infallible. Mm-hmm. But it's more secure than what we have now.
Especially if it was buried.
Yeah.
I know this is going to come up later on in capital projects, but when we're looking at burying things, Libby, has fiber optics come up at all? It's something that we might be looking at.
Most of the fiber is already buried, right?
Oh, it is.
Like for cable?
We have a combination, a lot of it runs along the poles now.
Okay.
We do have fiber that
We-
is on poles.
I mean, we haven't talked about burying that for, I'm not sure what you mean, like,
Well, it sounds like our internet connectivity is reliant on cables that are above ground. So as we're looking at running things underground, just wondering if that's something that's been mentioned. And I think some of the fiber optics would be an upgrade to what we currently have. Is that correct or no? I'm not a specialist in fiber optics by any means, so I might be confusing some of the different technologies.
Most of our core departments are already on fiber.
Okay.
Some of it's buried, some of it's on poles. If we're going to be tearing up roads to begin with, it might be worth looking into at least running conduit, if not the actual physical fiber, to allow for that expansion in the future. It would require a cost-benefit analysis to determine what would be feasible, and what wouldn't be feasible for the town, what would be cost-effective. But if you're going to be tearing up roads anyway, and there's space, you'd probably put conduit down just to accommodate that.
Okay.
I think DPW is the last major department that doesn't have fiber.
Yeah.
So, and they go down a lot. So this would be a big upgrade.
They're a high priority.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
and capital projects is a bit different than what you're going to see here, because it's kind of a dynamic moving target a little bit with capital projects. So I'm going to be pointing out some things that might be different. A couple weeks ago, when I gave you update number 2, there was a request to get more deep into what is being requested below $1 million, which we were previously focusing on above $1 million. So I've got the overview of the process again. We started the process for fiscal 21 in the spring of 2019 with reviewing prior year capital projects and then potential upcoming changes to the CIP, the Capital Improvement Plan. Over the summer, the departments all got instructions. We had a bit of a transition because we were moving to new software, and that has been something of a challenge, as it turns out. But once it's all up and running, it'll be better, hopefully, and help us out with reviewing and keeping things current and things like that. But it's been a bit of a transition to move to that new software. During the fall, town administration, summer into fall, town administration met with all the departments, and then Capital Program Committee began meeting with them in the fall. And we've been trying to give the board and the FinCom, inviting them to this meeting, regular status updates. Capcom is maybe closing in on the end of their review process, and now they're reviewing what their recommendations are going to be. And you all have a meeting with that group, Capcom and the FinCom, on Monday the 16th at 4 p.m. for them to review with you where they are with recommendations. So specifically for fiscal 21, proposed projects by department are as follows. Fire has 3 projects. They're all listed there. The ALS item and the replacement of the SCBA's are ongoing equipment replacement programs, and trench rescue equipment is something new. IT has the 3 items shown there, and all of that pretty much is a continuation of or annual requests for those items. Marine Department has 1 item, a patrol boat replacement. This big item here, Island Home, designed for a new facility, I think that number is perhaps a bit under discussion, specifically with respect to the overall, perhaps bigger project of an actual new facility. And right now we're trying to get a better handle on just how many beds are needed and what level they could potentially be at, so that maybe we could have a potentially, I hate to say this out loud, but a smaller facility with other means of care being offered through it in some manner. Okay, police has 1 item, a sewer extension at the Loran housing barracks area. We put that property into the sewer district at last year's town meeting, and at some point, we need to hook them into sewer. Their septic is either failed or failing. Public safety, this would be a return of the public safety auxiliary building item, which passed at last year's town meeting and did not pass at the ballot. That may be up for discussion. Public Works has a couple of categories. Facilities is the first category. There's a number of items shown here. Capcom, I think, has a bit of a concern that as to the bandwidth, basically, of DPW to take on additional projects. We still have projects pending from fiscal 19 and fiscal 20. So I expect that at some point, these numbers are probably going to be lowered. The townwide facilities master plan item is direct out of the board's strategic plan, and that $346,000 number is actually going to be a reappropriation from existing funds. Public Works Transportation, we've got some annual requests in here, those first few items shown above, cobblestone improvements, et cetera. And then we have some continuing projects. These are projects that are already underway. The Bartlett Surfside roundabout design, I know the board may want to have some discussion about that. The traffic data collection stations, that actually has been a smaller, for the first year, I think was last year. The idea is to begin installing these data collection stations around the island, and they've actually turned out to be much more expensive than originally thought, about double what was originally thought. So this is an increased number from what you, Jason, have seen so far at Capcom. In your packet, I think you had an item listed as Lovers Lane, Orkawa reconstruction, and that is sort of technically internally known as Surfside Area Roads Reconstruction Phase 2. Phase 1 was the boulevard, and it's not actually Orkawa. It's Lovers Lane would be Phase 2. Thank you for bringing that to my attention yesterday. And Phase 3 would be Monahanset and Orkawa. And there are some engineering reasons, I guess, for that phasing. New and other projects. You've seen some of this before. Newtown Road, the board early on was supportive of having that project in. That also corresponds with one of the goals in the strategic plan. Amelia Drive and Waite Drive improvements. You heard a presentation about this earlier in the fall. Sconset Footbridge needs some repairs, and the bridge reconstructions. This would be Millie's and Massasoit, and I heard somewhere along the line today those might actually be moved out a year because I'm not sure we're quite done with design of the improvements there. Public Works general, just that's, general public works items, mostly equipment or vehicle replacements, and the stormwater system assessment, which is shown there. The school has a number of items shown here. They have been met with about those. And then we have some town administration / select board items. So the board, I believe, knows about the Children's Beach stormwater. This would be the big redo of the pump station. And this HMP means hazard mitigation plan. So what we've done is, with the hazard mitigation plan, taken out, we've worked all of the projects, and there's around 50 or so in the hazard mitigation plan, and put them into the capital improvement plan. So that is what some of these are coming up in fiscal 21. So the Children's Beach stormwater is an item in the hazard mitigation plan, and that 3.3 million is something of a placeholder right now because the design for that facility is not complete yet. The senior center, I think, as you know, we're waiting on a cost for that, and or whether there will be a property acquisition. Fulling Mill Road design is listed in the hazard mitigation plan, and I have asterisked it there because in the HMP there are estimated costs for all of the projects, and some of them may be a bit high, some may be a bit low. They need a little bit of review, and this one, I believe we actually have the design number, the design we've accepted, or I believe we've already accepted the design as a gift, and the idea is that a nearby property owner would fund the design, and then the town would, in a future fiscal year, fund the actual improvements. The Town Pier Wave Attenuator is an item listed in the hazard mitigation plan for about $200,000. That funding, though, is, we believe, available in the existing appropriation, so it won't be an additional cost in 21. the townwide document management system, this is phase 2. We've already got phase 1 underway. We hope we can move into phase 2. Townwide building security is something that's become an issue with, national events with workplace violence. Underground wiring feasibility study. This has come out of the L8 project, and it's a new item for 21. It hasn't been in the capital improvement plan prior to this. And the idea is, as I think we've discussed previously, that we would engage an engineer to evaluate what it would take to put all the wires underground in a certain area, perhaps the core and maybe some other outer areas, including where do you start, how do you phase it, how do you coordinate with the utilities that are involved, what would it take ultimately for there to be a project manager of a big project like that? Obviously, it would be multi-year. So that's what that would cover, that sort of study of how we would plan for that.
And on that, Libby, I wouldn't, if we were doing RFP, I wouldn't limit it to just downtown, because I would say island-wide, how do we do this? There's a lot that are already underground. You're sort of all the way up to Nantucket or whatever. Yeah. But I think there's sort of, because you want them to be able to look and say, how do you sequence this? How does it make sense?
Yeah, okay, so island-wide, we should probably just change that too. I don't know if that'll be more money or not, but we'll make sure we add that.
I look at some of these numbers like that, and
I know.
I say, how can it be more money?
I know.
$500 million is a lot of money where I'm from, but.
It is, right. So these are just the totals by department, and at the moment, the requests total $37 million. Some of that is likely to be either removed by you all or reduced by Capcom or not recommended or moved out into future years. Looking out a little, fiscal 22 and beyond, I've just listed here the fiscal 22, next slide, please. The bigger projects, so we've got coming up, Public Works Facility Design and Construction, that's about 18 million. There is evidently the possibility of a new or expanded middle school, and we've had some very recent discussion with the school about that. Municipal offices, that would hopefully come out of the municipal facilities master plan. There will probably be a number of coastal resiliency plan projects. There are some already in the hazard mitigation plan, and there's probably more that will come out of the coastal resiliency plan that's under development now or review with the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee. Strategic plan projects, that may be ongoing depending on what the board puts in there. Hazard mitigation plan projects, as I mentioned, we didn't list them out here, but they are being worked into the capital improvement plan. Seasonal town employee housing, we have funding currently to do site design and a plan for that housing, for design basically, and so this would be the actual potential construction, although we're hoping to go modular, so it might potentially be less, but who knows. We used a yacht club number and basically doubled it. And then Parks Master Plan projects. As you know, the Parks Master Plan is out in draft form. Park and Rec is reviewing it, and there are likely to be projects that come out of that will be phased into the capital improvement plan. And then just continuing the process, as I mentioned some of this already. Capcom's finishing up its reviews and recommendations. You all have a meeting on December 16th. Capcom hopefully will have its final report out by the end of January or early February. And Finance Director and I are reviewing funding sources now. Free cash is obviously going to be a funding source. We may need some of that to fund fiscal 20 items that are maybe not even capital related. So we want to be very cautious with the use of free cash. We will examine all prior year articles to see if those projects are completed and we can reappropriate if there's funding left over. We do have a minimum capital funding requirement in for fiscal 21. It's around $1 million. And there's always, potentially grants available, and then the debt and capital exclusions that are fallbacks, basically, depending on what we want to put forward. So you may want to talk about one or two of those things.
I have a couple of things.
You want to keep them in?
I think at this stage, we should take out the design for the Bartlett and the Amelia mini roundabout. and prioritize other road projects over those.
I actually already took out the mini
Oh,
roundabout.
sorry.
Based on our discussion earlier.
Yeah.
But, I'm sorry. Okay, so that's in your packet.
Yes, I'm
But,
just not turning around.
I know. I took that out based on A, our discussion of earlier today, but B, there was some internal confusion about whether that even was a submitted project.
Right.
And I think we eventually concluded that it was not really a submitted project, so it wasn't really totally valid.
We didn't review it at Capcom.
Yeah,
yet.
okay.
So when I saw it, I thought the same thing.
Regardless of that, I think that for now, we should table the going further with the Bartlett
I would agree
roundabout.
with that. Yeah.
And I also think that in light of the failure of the Public Safety Auxiliary Building last year at the ballot and sentiment that's out there with spending, I think that we should table that for a year as well. But that's just my suggestion.
I agree with that.
I would agree with both of those.
I think when you sit and talk to public safety Capcom really asks really in-depth questions of what's the cost of the vehicles if they sit out for 10 years. And if we don't think it's going to pass, that's kind of what we decide. When Capcom looks at it, we really, every once in a while we start getting into we'll pass the town meeting and we're like, oh, no, that's not our purview. We pull it back in, and is it a value for what they're asking? And so that's why we haven't made our final decision. That's why we're kind of pushing forward with the auxiliary building.
No, I think it does have a value. I just don't think it's going to pass this year.
And yeah, I would agree. I do think it has value, but I think bringing it back again without any significant changes when it was voted down just last year, I think it would be better to take it off. And, I think the reality is that we may end up having some proof over the years that we're spending X percent more replacing vehicles over time that justifies a $3 million building.
I think people can tell us that right now that'll happen. We don't have to wait to see it. I know you know that, but I think you're saying the public.
Yeah, and I think we knew that last year when it was voted down. So I guess I don't know that there's been a significant change now. But I do see the value in it, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the difference last year was there was, 30 and then 20 million for housing. There was really, really big projects. And that was one that when you looked at all, this is my opinion, when you looked at all of them together, that didn't seem very important. When you looked at 20 million for housing and going down the road. Yeah, I know people think $3 million for a shed. That's what I hear. It's more than that. But yeah, that's our purview. Mm-hmm. But Matt, you said to take away the auxiliary building as well.
Politically, I'm not sure people are ready to vote for it when they see some of these other things. But I agree. I see a value in getting the vehicles, sort of undercover. I looked up. There was a study when we were talking about the DPW, and there was a study about saving $4 million a year of wear and tear on DPW buildings, and it was in somewhere on the Cape, and they had studied it and found out what a benefit it was, especially if you're sitting out here in the salt water. So the same thing would apply here, but I'm not sure. I mean, we could do it one of two ways. You just keep putting it forward, saying it's the right thing to do, and people, can believe it isn't and vote it down.
Right.
Or you take a break and come back, So.
I just err on the side of I like to give staff the opportunity to have the best tools to do the job we're asking them to do. And if the truck's outside versus inside, they can still do their job. But over time, there's a level of being proud of your equipment and keeping it nice. And that's kind of the bigger picture stuff that I look at. We want to give them the tools to do the best job they can, whether it's fast internet or trucks that work and vehicles that work all the time and not have to be out to the weather. So these are conversations we have at Capcom, but I understand that it might not pass the town meeting.
Do you know the value of the equipment that's being stored?
Not off the top of my head.
No,
they presented it in the meeting, so people like Peter McEachran and Nat Lowell, they kind of do all the calculations, and that's kind of their world, and Stephen Welch too, and they really look at the numbers, and it would benefit it. I don't know if it's going to cover the cost in 6 years or 10 years, like you would look at like a solar array in your house. Like when can you pay it off? But it would pay it off over time.
Or you cover all your vehicles with a solar array across. Rita would like this, cover the entire parking lot with a solar array, and that'll stop the rain and the snow from hitting them and produce all the energy for this building. I mean, there's other ways to look at it. So.
And some of the reasons why I'm asking this, getting into detail, so I can go back to Capcom and say, here was the consensus from Select Board. And Bartlett Surfside design, because it's going on for 10 years, is it just too hot of an item? So we want to take it off?
I think that there are other road improvements that should go above those that are more pressing.
I think what's there is kind of working right now, and I think we would be kind of tone deaf. That's one that we've tried a couple times. I think we'd be a little tone deaf not to listen. And maybe we tried it last year.
No, we haven't tried Bartlett yet.
Everything's always passed in regard to that.
The Bartlett?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the 5-0 vote from the school, I think they need to be changed. But anyway, and there is some discussion of whether a mini roundabout would be more appropriate and fit there. And if it does, and if that's something that the school can get on board with, then that might be our first step. And it wouldn't be a $3.2 million project, it'd be a $800,000 project or something. So, there's other options that I think still need to be looked at a little bit.
Was there anything else that stood out? That was
it for me.
Same for me.
Yeah. The design money for Island Home is the one that jumps out at me. That is a lot of money to do a design on something that we haven't really sorted yet. I would hope that we would pull that back if we don't have the demand stuff, if we haven't done the negotiation, if we haven't figured out how we're going to run this thing. I would hope that we would hold that back, because what happens with a lot of this stuff is it's a psychology of previous investment, or it's so people vote something and you have to keep going even though it's not the right thing, or you get a vote at town meeting and what you're told is, oh, don't worry about it, you can change this later. But then when it goes to the board later, it's like, well, it was voted at town meeting, you have to do this. So sometimes, we really, I don't know, it's kind of tricky. So, if we've appropriated $5 million and spent $2 million and spent something else, we're going to do it. Even though, like the last one we received, the last design we received for the Island Home, the first people who wrote the design sent us a letter and said, what are you guys doing? This isn't at all what you should be doing. So we got, from our first consultant, we got admonished for the design that came from our second one because it was completely against the principles they were using, designing the first one to try to make it, better for the residents and better for the town. And so I just think we've still things to sort out.
Well, I mean, what we've talked about prior in regard to the ongoing operations is putting the override on the warrant first before we go for the design. And that number is not a definitive. Obviously, we would try to get a lower number and not spend the full $5 million, but it would be an authorization for it. And we are conducting getting additional information on trying to figure out any way to, essentially decrease the size of what we're operating there to make it something that can be funded longer and have some other alternatives that are potentially subsidized by the town, or other alternatives to do all levels of care that are needed. So I think we're still putting a lot of work into
No,
this.
we are.
But
Yeah.
we've got to get authorization to be able to do something, to be able to move forward. I would say if the override doesn't pass, I don't know that we would go forward with any design.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of you're talking about the operating override. I'm not sure I'd support an operating override till I knew how we were going to operate it going forward. And so it's sort of I know it's a chicken and egg, which came first, but I kind of think, we ought to sort that out. One of my high school roommates is in the business, has grown up in the business, and I've shared with him, he and his brother, and he's got in touch with a couple other people, what we're dealing with, and they have some pretty strong opinions which they've sent, and I've sent along for consideration. But we're going really against the tide right now, trying to do the big, huge, facility that was presented with 45 beds, et cetera. There has to be another way to do it, and scale it down, offer different types of services, combine it with the hospital or with a nonprofit that's formed or existing. There has to be some other way and some economies that can be found. Like right now, we're repeating so many different things needlessly as an island. Like, I think we have to look at it holistically and say, what is it we really need to do for for our elders and others who have these needs, and what's the most cost efficient, best way to do it for them? And, and sticking with how we're doing it isn't, I don't think. And so, so finding out what is really, I know it's emotional and it's political, people feel very strongly, but I think we have to have the sort of the fortitude and the vision to keep plugging at this till the right thing will come, but we have to find it. And I'm worried that if we do the operating override, we won't do that. That we won't find the right way to do this. So.
My only question with that, though, is that I think that to take the next steps with a new building, if it's not $5 million, it could be $3 million. Architect's fees can be estimated based on the overall cost of the building, and we had $30 million on the last one and $50 million on this one. Is if we move forward to make those expenditures and we don't know, one of the elephants in the room that keeps coming up is, do people even support us being in the business? And so if we don't answer that before we spend $3 million, then that's $3 million that goes down the drain if there's actually not enough support for the building in the first place. So that would be, I understand where you're coming from in terms of we should know what we're operating, but I do think that knowing that we have the confidence from the community that this is what the path that we want to take would be important.
Yeah, but you have to be able to say, this is the right path. This is the right path. This is why it's the right path. And here's how we're going to do it. And unless you can say that, then what are we doing? We could have we can't design a building if you don't know whether you're going to have 20 beds or 45 beds or 60 beds, because you're going to add, or add some other services, and you're going to do home health care, et cetera. We don't know what the path is. And so without that, how do you design? How would I design a bakery without knowing how many employees and loaves of bread I'm going to make?
And those,
Sorry, but regardless, we need the operating override to keep operating the existing facility. Unless we're planning to shut it down tomorrow.
No, I don't. Well,
So-
I think we could use free cash for a year, and that would, I know I don't like to do that, but that's
But we use that for one-time expenditures,
understood.
not for
and
ongoing operations.
That's my point. We use it one time, and we have this figured out by next year.
Well, I think that we would if we had the authority to borrow to do the design, we're in process to figure out exactly what we're going to design.
and that is what is out for RFP now, is asking, looking at the demand analysis. And that's something that the timing might be tight, but those are the questions. And I think you're right. We don't really know what that design fee will be until we answer some of these questions. So that is something that is in process and has come out of the discussion over the last 6 months. So.
Just to clarify, it's not technically an RFP right now, it's quotes, but actually Matt's information that he's been passing on was really helpful in developing a scope for that. So that's along the lines of what we're looking at. And I think what we were hearing this afternoon from Rachel was that we may actually have to do a more formalized RFP based on the quotes that have come in. But it's still under evaluation. So, but it is definitely in progress, like you're saying.
Okay. Are we done? For now?
So it doesn't, I don't know that it needs to be a vote, but it's general consensus to take out the Bartlett Surfside Design funds and the Public Safety Auxiliary Building for now.
I would keep the public safety building. I think what Jason said, with so many other things being on the ballot, I think it's a really important thing for the fire department. They're finally in their new space, and, you know, I think they need the auxiliary building.
Libby, is this our last chance to pull that out?
It's not your last go-around with
So
it,
why
no.
don't we leave it for now?
Okay.
Okay.
Because we would lose if we
keep
took a vote right
thinking
now,
about it.
Christie. So let's just wait.
Okay, next up, discussion regarding select board appointment policy for boards, committees, and commissions. This is just a discussion point, and with council here, there's just been a number of questions throughout the community about whether there should be any additional policies for appointed committee members in regard to other organizations that they might serve on that are taking positions on certain town business. And we have talked to John Giorgio about it. I don't know if you wanted to make some comments. You know, there are certainly ethics regulations.
Good evening, everyone. So the first thing I wanted to say is that this can get a little bit complicated, as you can imagine, because whenever you're dealing with establishing criteria, if you will, for eligibility for appointment, you have to be careful about not infringing on individuals' constitutional rights of association and also of free speech. And there have been basically conflicting case law at this point as to whether or not a municipality can properly prohibit individuals or establish, I should say, an appointment criteria that would prohibit individuals from both serving on a board and, as I said, basically engaging in community or political activity. So I would essentially offer caution about that and maybe think about this a little bit further. Now, when it comes to individual boards and committees, a policy voted by the select board might not be sufficient. And I'll use as an example the finance committee, because the statute on finance committees actually says that a town may, by bylaw, provide for the appointment of finance committee members. So if you were considering the establishing eligibility criteria, particularly for the finance committee, that would have to be done by a bylaw, of course approved at town meeting. And as we looked at this question further, we went back and determined that in 2011, there actually was a amendment to the finance committee bylaw, which as it was proposed in the warrant itself, it would have provided that individuals, rather than paraphrase it, let me just read it to you, if that's okay. The article would have established a prohibition against any member of the Finance Committee directly having a direct interest in the expenditures of a town appropriation. Now that, at the time, it raised some questions about, well, what does it mean to have a direct interest in the expenditure of an appropriation? And I think at that time we gave advice that you would probably want to apply the basic provisions of the conflict of interest law, which prohibits individuals from participating in a matter in which they or a member of their immediate family or their employer has a financial interest. And there are, of course, pretty stringent provisions in the conflict of interest law that do address these kinds of situations. And certainly, I think board members would be well advised if there is an issue, if there is a potential financial interest, it's best to simply recuse from participation in that matter. But what happened back in 2011 was when we actually got to town meeting, a different motion was made by the Finance Committee, and it deleted that direct interest language. And so now your bylaw says that no member of the Finance Committee shall be an officer or employee of the town or county or any other municipal entity. That's all it says. What was proposed in 2011 in the warrant actually had a provision that if you developed an interest, a direct interest in a matter for which there was an appropriation, you were automatically deemed to have vacated your position. That was taken out, so that is not part of your bylaw. So again, one option for you to consider is to rely upon the conflict of interest law as a means of ensuring that outside financial interests are not people who are voting on not just the Finance Committee, but this board, any board in town. Obviously, you're all subject to the conflict of interest law, and which prohibits participating in a matter in which you have a financial interest. And that's why we see from time to time board members stepping down and recusing themselves on particular matters. But if you want to proceed with this, it would have to be by bylaw, at least with respect to the Finance Committee. And we would have to try to craft something based upon some competing court cases to minimize the potential for a legal challenge.
If the article from 2011 had passed as it was in its original form, that would then have to go to, that's the one that would then have to basically be proven using some of the existing case law.
So if you were to enact a bylaw now, or amend the existing bylaw, as you know, that would have to be submitted to the Attorney General for the initial review. And the Attorney General would most likely provide at least a caution to the town. I don't know that they would disapprove the bylaw because really the standard of review of the Attorney General is quite narrow. It's whether it's consistent with state law or not. If it does raise constitutional issues, then there may be a caution, and we've seen this before, which is basically you have to be careful how you apply this bylaw and that you don't violate anybody's constitutional rights. But even if the Attorney General were to approve it, Rita, then an individual who is aggrieved by, if that person is now legally prohibited, for example, from serving on the Finance Committee, then there's always the potential for a court challenge, regardless of what the Attorney General's opinion is. And there is conflicting case law at this point. It's not settled law, and I don't think you want to be the test case here, I'm guessing.
I feel like I'm out of the loop on something. It sounds like somebody is suggesting that we do this. It sounds like, because you're saying, geez, if you want to go forward, what is it that we might go forward with and who is bringing it forward?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm missing something.
Well, who
brought this forward and what are they asking us to do?
So I was asked to look at whether or not the board could establish a policy with respect to board appointments generally. And so that's what I've done. I've looked at it, and I presented to you tonight my report. Now, I don't know if there's any interest on the board to actually go forward with something. If you want to do that, we would have to look at the particular boards that would be affected and whether a policy or a bylaw would be required. But again, I'm advising caution here because of some of the constitutional issues.
The idea is that there were questions about whether we should have additional criteria or additional policies in how we make our appointments. And if things changed with people joining new committees and so forth outside of the town or inside of the town, if any of that would change their current status. So we asked for an opinion, and you've got it.
Can I ask a question about, we've come up against this many a times before I was on the board in the last 2.5 years, when you have appointed people on, not FinCom, other committees, and they take to social media and there's potential defamation. Every time we ask, you say it's free speech. There's not really much you can do about it. Just don't appoint them again, is what I've kind of been told. That's really all we can do.
So the authority of this board to appoint members to committees or to reappoint a member to a committee is a highly discretionary act, and each board member may have particular reasons why they don't want to reappoint somebody, and you're perfectly free to make that determination when you're voting on whether to make a particular reappointment. That is, as I said, a highly discretionary act. Now, having said that, obviously the board has to be careful that you don't articulate a policy that is going to be in some fashion discriminatory, because you don't have to give a reason for non-appointment, but you shouldn't have a bad reason. And that's true even with at-will employees. You don't have to give a reason necessarily, but you can't have a bad reason. You can't retaliate against someone because they've exercised their First Amendment rights. And I think if you were to try to codify this through a bylaw or a policy, I think that's where you could get yourself into trouble. But when appointments come up, each board member examines their conscience and they either vote to reappoint or not. And there's no obligation to give a reason. And I would generally recommend that you don't articulate a particular reason. You just vote whether you want to reappoint somebody or not.
Yeah, this is somewhat problematic because, there's not 100 people trying to get on all our committees. There's one here and one there. Very few people want to put their hat in the ring, right, and volunteer their time. And it's a lot of work on all these committees. So I'd be hesitant, without even hearing what you have to say, putting any more restrictions on, because there's not that many people coming in anyway.
I also think relying on the conflict of interest law that exists seems strong enough, and as long as we understand what recusals are and direct interests are.
Now, if I could pick up on that, Rita, so, you have every right and expectation that board and committee members will follow the conflict of interest law, just as you all have to do it. You have to take the online conflict of interest test. Now, if you have a particular appointee who is violating the conflict of interest law, whether they've received an opinion or not, that is certainly something that the board can consider when it comes time for reappointment. That's not a bad reason. So there's a large body of case law now and commission opinions on does it mean to have a financial interest? Is it direct? Is it indirect? Is it remote? And they can anybody can avail themselves, any municipal official can pick up the phone and call the State Ethics Commission to get an informal opinion, or they can ask us and we provide a formal opinion, which is filed with the town clerk. It's sent to the State Ethics Commission. And if the State Ethics Commission does not disagree with our opinion, then that individual appointee, municipal official, can rely upon that opinion going forward. And so there wouldn't be a conflict if they acted in accordance with that opinion, assuming that they've made full disclosure of the relevant facts.
We can also not appoint if someone is not following the code of conduct and is treating other people improperly. Like we have that latitude. I don't know that we have the latitude to get rid of them at any point, but we have the latitude. We have a lot of power just sitting here if someone is being a jerk to say, please stop being a jerk. We don't really use that, but we have a lot more power here than we think. I'm a little anyway. I think everyone on island has some sort of conflict. We all are doing things that we're all taxed and we're all and I know some rise to a level of conflict and some don't. I think what we're talking about is unnecessary. I think the questions that Don received are aimed at one particular person, but I think, and my guess, but I'm out of the loop. But if it is, I don't feel that I'm insulted by it, because I think the person that is being, I think that people are worried about. They're worried about someone who's done sort of a lot of really good things for the island, and and if I were that person, I would be insulted that this discussion was even happening. If someone had this discussion with me about me and I would be upset, because I would say, hey, if you want to talk to me, give me a call, ask me. If you want to know why I voted, I'll tell you why I voted. You may not agree with me. I'd be upset if you're honest and you're doing something on, for the right reason, for the good of the town. And then this is how some people treat you because they're worried that they aren't going to, that it's not how they want things. I don't get it. So anyway, I'm a little, I don't know. I think I know what this is about and I don't like it. So
Matt, the only thing I would say about that is the conflict of interest laws are very strict. And if an individual, it could be because they don't know any better, they're ill-informed, but if they're violating the conflict of interest law, then it's totally appropriate for the appointing authority to ask for an opinion about whether you're complying with the conflict of interest law or not. That's a little bit different than adopting, obviously, a policy. And that's why I said it certainly would be reasonable for the board to look to the conflict of interest law to make a determination whether somebody should recuse themselves or not. And if they're serially violating the conflict of interest law, then that is not a bad reason when it comes time for a reappointment.
No, and I'm not arguing that.
Yeah,
I'm just,
okay.
It's different than that. And the experiences that people have had calling about other people on conflicts of interest, they don't get very far, because the state just says, well, it's up to the individual. The individual has to decide. And so, I know people that have called to try to drop a dime on other people, right, and they were valid calls, and the state really wasn't interested. They said it's really up to the individual, and it's right, almost like a lawsuit situation.
But I've also seen where a dime has been dropped on someone, and an investigation is conducted, and that municipal official is fined by the State Ethics Commission. So there are a lot of times when the dime is dropped, it's purely for political purposes or whatever. But if there is truly a violation, then you've got a problem. If town council can't represent you, you have to hire your own counsel, you're dragged up to Boston, and it can become a real problem for a municipal official. So that's why everything the town can do to ensure that its employees are educated, that's why we come down and give seminars on the conflict of interest law. That's really important, and it's a service that the board provides that I think can avoid a lot of heartache later on. That's my opinion.
I also think there's value in the bigger picture discussion, because I think that it's something that has come up maybe a little more quietly over at least the 2 years that I've been in here. And I think a reminder of the difference between disclosure, abstaining, recusing is important for all of us to be reminded, even we do those workshops, some of us don't attend all of them. So I think it is a good reminder. And I think as well in terms of for us as the appointing authority, having reminders exactly what we are looking at when we do get questioned, being able to answer very specifically. So I do think this is helpful regardless of how it came up. And I think maybe it should, be a discussion that happens once a year around committees and commissions. I think between the code of conduct, I think misusing or misunderstanding when to recuse, I see it on some of the other committees that I'm on. It wouldn't be bad to have a public reminder, maybe timed more with the annual appointments. But yeah, I do think it's important. It is confusing. So I think it's a good reminder, and there's value in the conversation regardless.
Thank you, John. Committee reports?
None for me.
Coastal Resiliency met on week before last and again this week. Have had Concom in, have had water company in, going through sort of their infrastructure, how they view some of it, some of the issues that Concom deals with that have to deal with it. If you go on the town website, there's a library that the Coastal Resiliency has put out, and it's pretty amazing. Just the stuff that we've already done all in one place is pretty eye-opening. Just sort of the different flood maps and where the water will flow, and what the tides will do here under different tides and different winds are all sort of online. There's also a list of probably 6 or 8 different communities and what they've done for coastal resiliency for their planning, which we're looking to follow. The committee is waiting for a document that's a couple of months overdue from, I think, Brune, Malone, or whatever. That will be sort of the first thing that they'll start to plug in to the whole issue. That's one. Number 2 is, I just heard Retrix is out as of a few days ago. And that is sort of not much that we really can do. It's a business and et cetera, but it's a loss to the island. Cape Air doesn't fly nearly what they used to fly. And it's very difficult when you have weather events like we've had for people to get on and off the island. And they've been complaining to me that they're missing appointments and other things. I'm just sort of saying this to, if any of the airport commissioner people are listening, maybe they are. I hope that they find some way to encourage, sort of year-round regular service, rather than just, we don't need more people for the peaks. We don't need more people from different cities for the long weekend of the 4th and this long weekend and that. We need regular service that, that we all can rely on. And, I was stuck one time coming home and couldn't get home for like 5 days because one of the businesses went out of business back in the day. So this isn't the first time, and they always seem to go out this time of year, and it's empty at the airport. So I don't know how we do that. I don't know how they incentivize people to provide that service, but maybe they can charge less to the, gate fees or less for the counters, or find some way to make sure that the island is served, especially these periods. Anyway, that's just another one. The only other thing is we did have a letter, and we've got Rob here, and I was wondering, when is there's a sidewalk committee that's going to work with you. When is that going to start? Is that something because we did get a letter on that regard, and I don't think they've met yet. I think it's pretty important.
Thank you. Rob McNeil, DPW Director. The sidewalk work group that the DPW put together obviously met starting last winter. We'll continue discussions through this winter for the projects for the future. The board voted to move forward with the projects that were on the docket, and those projects are being executed currently. The ones that were already in the pipeline that were in existence before the historical commission was reconstituted.
But now that they're reconstituted, they're going to be involved, and that's going to happen when?
They'll be involved as soon as the projects start to continue to be discussed.
Okay. Right, because we all received a letter. You probably got a copy of it.
I did.
Yeah, and I think some of the practices they're concerned about, that's what they believe has led to the big problems at the top of Main Street. And so I want to make sure that we're following what we were sort of asked for.
We are.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I had more of a community story update that I just wanted to share. I had gone on the 5th grade class to Boston a couple weeks ago, and I just thought it was really fun to hear some of the kids' comments throughout the day. They were really interested in the compostable trash cans in Boston, so Rob, if we could get on that. And they refused to buy water bottles in Faneuil Market and wanted to use their reusable water bottles. So it just kind of made me happy for the future.
That's excellent.
And I just wanted to thank Matt for bringing up Retrix. I was going to bring that up. Just thinking, as we talk about the downtown congestion, a lot of it is driven by the ferries. And so if there are other options at the airport, I think that could also help as we're thinking big picture in our strategic planning.
I had one thing, and I don't know if I can ask this question in comments. It just made me look at our agenda, and we had a public hearing for an HEC appeal, and it's been on here. It's been withdrawn. The parties figured it out, but it's been on our agenda 6 or 7 different times. And I know when I was chair last year, anytime I had an HEC appeal, I would take things off the agenda, put them on next week, because it could be an hour to an hour and a half. Are we allowed, is it legally okay for us to say, like, we'll entertain this one more time and we're not going to anymore? Or is it every time they want to keep pushing the appeal on further? Is there a time limit, statute of limitations, anything?
We had, I think this actually was the 4th time it was on the agenda, but we had told them that if they didn't withdraw it, that it was going to be heard tonight no matter what.
So we can do that. We can say that. Okay. All right. That's good to know.
We did. And I mean, it's not like we were threatening them. They had been negotiating for a resolution for quite some time. It was just taking a very long time.
Yeah. Just know as you guys make your agenda, it's
balancing act.
Yeah.
Well, that's something, but that's also sometimes the power we have is just to say, hey, like we did in Surfside. Hey, we're going to take the road and we're going to park on it. If you two neighbors can't figure it out, we're going to turn it into a parking lot. We need more parking. They solved that thing within a week. So there are things like that we do have, taking authority and other things that, but we have to be willing to, to make the threat and follow through if they don't. Oh, good.
Great.
Motion to adjourn?
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
You do have some things to say.
Yeah, any other stuff?
Yeah, there's real estate stuff.
Sorry. Oh.